Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Ileana Knis, Director of Development of Community Relations and Development for Peace River Center. I appreciate you guys joining us today for our presentation on managing stress during uncertain times. We are definitely all living in uncertain and challenging times, so this presentation is very timely. Just a couple of things. We are recording this presentation, so it'll be available after we get finished through today. Our website is a great source of information, so please make sure you check back on our website to get a lot of resources during this time. Just a couple other things, please. We have a chat box and a Q&A at the bottom there where you can communicate with us if you have any questions during the presentation for Kirk. Please feel free at any time to use that. We have Carly with us who's going to be monitoring that and helping us through the presentation. And again, Kirk is an open book and he great presenter, so stop us and let us know if you have questions. He is ready to take questions throughout the presentation. Sorry, I'm going to shut down my email here because I don't know if you guys can hear my email going off, so I'm going to shut that down. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Kirk and we'll get this presentation started. So Kirk Fasshauer, licensed clinical social worker. He's your Director of Crisis Response Services and Professional Development for Peace River Center. And he's been with Peace River Center for over 20 years and was responsible for creating our crisis response team. And Kirk has various experience over his 30 years in mental health and psychiatric emergency healthcare experience. Kirk holds a master's degree in social work from Rutgers University in New Jersey and a bachelor's degree in psychology. And as I mentioned, he is a licensed clinical social worker here in Florida. He's also trained in crisis hostage negotiator and certified field traumatologist. So one of the things that's not on here is that Kirk really works directly with our local law enforcement officers to train them in crisis intervention training. So a lot of our local law enforcement officers are trained by Kirk and his crew. So Kirk, I'm going to let you take it away. I'm going to turn my video off as well and let you guys go on.
All right, well, thank you, Ileana. Good morning, everybody. Glad you're all here to join us. And we're here to talk about something very timely. And it's talking about managing stress during troubling times. And, you know, this is not just timely, but this is something we can do ongoingly, even beyond some of the difficult times. So I am about to share my presentation here. I think. There we go. There we go. Can everybody see the share there?
Yes, but it is not in presentation. There we go.
There you go. How's that? Okay. Excellent. So yeah, managing stress during troubled times. All right, so what we're going to hopefully do in this presentation is, you know, we're going to look at some of the basics of stress. It's always good to go back and rehash some of that, and because you hear a lot about stress out there, and there's lots of good information out on the internet and social media venues on stress and how to manage the stress. There's a plethora of exercises and things. I also teach a 40-hour class on how to manage stress, and we get into some real in-depth kinds of stuff and develop a stress management plan. So we're going to recognize some of those factors that influence it and begin to work on a plan for you in building your resiliency, because resiliency is how that's the armor that we put on to protect us from some of the bad stress in our life. And we're going to look at how to do some thought blocking, not blocking, but how to recognize when it is taking over some of your venues. So stress. Really, it's inevitable. It exists everywhere. Nobody can live without stress. As a matter of fact, by the very definition of what stress is, even when you're dead, your body is changing, and therefore stress is being created. So stress has to do with change. It's inevitable. It's part of our relationships, part of being in a family, in a job, and things like that. Now, the response that we have with the stress is that automatic physical reaction that we have when we come across something we either don't understand or don't know what to work with. This is an age-old response. So when we were out in the woods years ago, living life and trying to get through things, we come across a tiger. And then we end up with some choices when we meet that tiger. And it kicks in our fight, flight, or freeze response. All right. So it gives us this whole physiological thing that takes place within us, gives us the strength, gives us the power so that we are able to overcome that item that is stressing us out. So yeah, we're traipsing through the woods, we come across that tiger, and we can do a couple of things. We can stop and fight that tiger, right? And hopefully we win that fight. And if we win that fight, yay, we got a nice fur coat. Or we have tiger meat for lunch. Or we flight, we run like the dickens, run as fast as we can, and hopefully you can outrun a tiger. If not, at the very least, outrun the guy next to you. That way there the tiger gets something to play with, all right? Or the freeze response, where we just hold there. And we see this not just in humans, but in all types of wildlife. And when the freeze happens, the tiger gets lunch, all right? So we wanna watch out for these responses. These are kind of broad-based responses that we have to the stressors in our life. Now, nowadays, hopefully we're not running into any real tigers out there, but our tigers are different now. Demands of the family, demands of the workplace, the changes going on in our workplace, whether we go into the office, whether we stay at home and work through Zoom. You get extra projects put on you, your schedule, traffic if you're commuting, things like this, grades if you're a student, going to school nowadays. Do I do it through e-learning or do I do it through actually in person? And there's risk with that. Do I wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask? Oh, what's supposed to happen? All these things are stressors in our lives, and we do have some things to be able to respond to it. Now, I want to let you know that not all stress is bad, okay? Not all stress is bad. There's good stress. Call it eustress. That stress is the good stuff. That's what gets you up in the morning. That's what motivates you to do certain things, get out there and learn some things. It spurs you on, gets you up there and go, yes, I'm going to do this. Planning a vacation, or even taking that vacation, or doing some activity that you're just starting to learn. There's stress with that. You don't want to make mistakes. You want to be very careful and things like that. So there's good stress. Then there's the bad stress. Bad stress wears you down, tires you out, can encompass you. It's sometimes unpredictable in nature. It's I don't know how to handle this. Your coping mechanisms are being really tested at this point. And with bad stress, if you do not address it, it can physically harm you and can harm you even on an emotional level. It can alter your brain wiring even. So people don't minimize the issue of stress. Stress is good or bad, is something we need to pay close attention to, because without doing that, it can lead to more serious conditions for us. So there's also this other thing called psychological stress, which means basically just thinking about something is going to create a stress reaction within your body. Your physiology is going to respond to the thought process and create some anxiety in you. Anxiety is a little bit heavier dose of stress, but that stress is there. Just thinking something bad is going to happen is enough to start the stress response and have some of the chemicals in your body be released. Okay, so if you don't address the stress, the bad stress in particular, it can suppress your immune system, and that opens the door for you to catch other diseases, other more serious kinds of illnesses. So yeah, your immune system gets weak, but we're built to survive. So first of all, there was a study done years ago by Lawson. And Lawson, what he looked at is the immune system, stress over time, and the immune system. So as the stress increases, our immune system can stay there and match that stress response as we go through that process. But the longer and longer that stressor is in place, our immune system starts to weaken. It starts to get tired out, basically. It can't run the long marathon. So I'm sure some of you are thinking, okay, we've been in a pandemic for 8-9 months now. How is that stress impacting our immune system? It is. And if you're under a great deal of stress, you're going to need to start to think about looking at what can I do to get some of my stressors under control. We're going to talk a little bit about that here in a minute. It can upset your digestive system or even your reproductive system. Again, this is a thing that comes to us that's age old. It's part of how we're built. Our stress response is set up so that our digestion slows down and blood goes to those necessary muscles to get us out of those areas if we need to fight or flight. With digestion slowing down, sometimes it sits there, and in extreme cases, we eliminate. We either vomit or we have diarrhea as a result of extreme stress because we're eliminating any extra baggage that may be within our system so that we can be svelte and move fast. All right. We have an increase of heart attack, of stroke as a result of not addressing stress issues. Again, it's part of the immune system becoming more susceptible to attack during this time. It can also speed up the aging process. All right, so if you want the secret to slowing down those wrinkles, it's practice some stress management. Getting out there and reducing some of your stressors or getting some of your stressors under control can help actually slow the aging process. You don't wrinkle, you don't get the white hairs as much as a result. It does slow that process down a bit. You also become more vulnerable to things, anxiety, depression, and other types of mental health kinds of issues can result if you do not address some of the stress in your life. All right. So like I was saying, hopefully you're not running across any tigers in your life nowadays, but there are factors that do influence our stress response to help reduce it, all right, or increase it. See, some of the factors here go into what is your support network like? A little bit more challenging nowadays to have physical contact with people, but think about this process through Zoom, through Skype, through Instagram, through Facebook, through any of those social media outlets that you would use to reach out to folks and talk with them. I had the fortunate pleasure of being part of a research study being done on cameras being utilized in disaster areas where you could set up a camera for somebody to have contact with a loved one that may not even be in the area or was in the area, and you're separated because of the particular disaster. And some of the interesting things we found is the visual, not even sound, because we had some technical issues with sound, but just the visual of seeing a loved one through the camera was enough to reduce that person's anxiety. So that connectedness that we have, we all strive for that. We want to reach out and say hello to our friends, say I love you to our loved ones, and be connected. So how strong is that network? Even during these trying times where we can't physically get together necessarily, or that there are challenges to that process, there are some alternatives for us to reach out and connect. The sense of control. How much control do you have over a given situation? And that's an important part here to handling stress, because there are certain things we do have control over and other things we absolutely do not. And when we go to make a stress management plan, that's one of the first tasks you want to do, is stop and take an inventory of those items that I have control over this, I don't have control over that. So you can see where this is going. The things you have control over, change as appropriate. Keep in mind that changing things does also create stress, but that's that's a good stress. You're adapting or changing things. Those things you have no control over, that's where adaptation and coping comes in. So how do we adapt to those situations we don't have control over? What is the message we play in our head? Because that message we play in our head about those things we have control over, we don't have control over, impacts our outlook and our attitude with regard to pulling through in these stressful situations. How do you deal with your emotions routinely? That ability to recognize, hey, I'm having an emotional reaction here, and is this a good thought process? Is this a good emotion at this time, or is it a reaction? So we're going to talk about a method later on, the STOP method, on how to take a moment and look at where that emotion is coming from and make some choices, some informed choices about yourself. And so that comes to the last bullet on this slide, and that has to do with knowledge and preparation. So a lot of you are on here learning a little bit about stress management and how to deal with it, which is a great thing. The more we know about something, the less anxious we're about it, and we have a sense of control. Is stress something we can control? Some things yes, some things no, and that is an important inventory to take, like I said earlier. So what we're talking about when we're wanting to get into controlling some of our stressors is really building our resiliency. That's the armor we put on to, make sure that the stressors of the world don't hurt us too much. All right. And when we talk about stress, we've seen in the last 9 months, we've seen an increase in anxiety and depression across the board. More so in our young people, and I'm talking like 15 to 24 age range there. They're in a transition as it is, and lots of things are happening in their life, and there are folks trying to break into the work field, and there are people in the process who've been around for a while losing their job through the pandemic. So anxiety, depression, that whole business of uncertainty, which we can do a whole workshop just on dealing with uncertainty even. So that's a big part to recognize when that when the stress is getting to the level of taxing our coping mechanisms, and now we start to have depression and anxiety step in. And that's where stress gets so bad that it starts to immobilize you. Okay, I mentioned some stress is good because it motivates you and moves you on. Practice some positive coping. All right, there's lots of things that people do to cope. Not all of it's good. Well, I'm going to deal with this by breaking out that six-pack. Well, that's not always the best way, or, hitting that huge bottle of scotch. Not the most positive methods. Eating, people stress eat. And when people stress eat, they're not picking out the the most healthiest of foods for them. You know, we like the fried stuff, the donuts, the sugary stuff, the high caloric kinds of items that just make us feel, ugh. All right. So we're going to practice some positive coping. We'll touch on some of that here in a moment. It's also important to recognize when you need to get help. Right. So you're not in isolation. We've got the resources here through Peace River Center and through our crisis line, through our appointment line to get out and seek that professional help. So when does that kick in? When it becomes overwhelming, you can call our emotional support line, 519-3744, and that'll come up later in the slide as well. You can call those folks there just to reach out. They're available 24/7. A counselor will talk to you about anything that you wish to talk about, and just call up and say, I just need to talk to somebody. And like I said, 2 in the morning, call. Somebody will answer the phone. You do want to develop a plan. So, you know, you need to create a plan to take that moment in time to deal with your stress. How are you going to deal with your stress? What are those positive coping mechanisms that you can put into play? And we'll talk a little bit more about some of that here as we talk about building our resiliency even more. So the first step in building your resiliency is, you know, being aware of your stressors. How do you respond to stress normally? Your everyday life, how do you deal with it? Well, I typically do this. Well, what's changed? Well, I used to, remember that phrase? I used to do this. Those are the ustas. You know, the ustas are pretty important things to stop and reflect on. What changed that you no longer do those things? And things change, you know, your interests change, and that's important as well. But how do you respond to stress on any given day? What does that look like for you? And you may want to ask some of those closest to you about how do I respond to stress, and do it in a non-stressful manner, of course, so that you can become much more aware of what those things are that spark that stress response in you. That awareness is extremely important so that you can start to work on bringing about, number 2, bringing about that relaxation response, okay? Again, getting out there and identifying some things. Maybe even learning a new skill on how to cope. One of the more simplest exercises out there is the deep breathing exercise. All right. And you don't need hundreds of dollars to do that exercise and all of this. You need to recognize, okay, when things are getting kind of rough, to do this simple little exercise. Ready? Watch very carefully, because it's going to happen fast. Did you see it? I know it was fast now. Just think about it. Stop for a moment. Everybody do it with me. Ready? It's taking a moment and taking a nice, deep, cleansing breath. Fill up your lungs with the rich nutrient air. Get it in there, and it's going to slow your process down just a little bit. Now, no major exercises going on there. You can do that anywhere. Nobody's going to look at you funny. You know, it's a cleansing moment to just slow some thought processing down. Now, you can put that into your stress management plan to do some more mindful breathing exercises. And what that kind of turns into is a form of meditation, where your meditation, you focus on your breathing, the ins and out, and slowing it down and things like this. Body scanning is about taking a moment and looking at, okay, so where does my stress hit me? You know, everyone knows what a tension headache is, right? That's the stress that grabs you in the back of the head here, all right? And you can feel it. All right, well, there are other places where your stress can appear physically. So doing a body scan is taking a quick moment and stopping and look, okay, where am I feeling the tension? And there is a process called progressive muscle relaxation, which can help you identify some of those areas where stress may be. It may not always be here. It may be in the shoulders, it could be even the gut, it could be in a cramp in your leg, it could manifest itself in many different areas, all right? Mindfulness. And we're going to do an exercise that it comes from the realm of mindfulness. And that is, again, being aware of the emotional response you're having to situations, taking that moment to, okay, how am I reacting? And it's called the S.T.O.P method. We'll talk more about it. Visualization, a little more complicated, takes a little more time. What you do is think of think of a place that's safe for you, a place that really helps you to get away and feel relaxed. You don't have to physically be there, but visualize being there. And when you go through that visualization process, you're going to look at taking in as much detail as possible. What are the sights in that visualization? What are the smells in that visualization? What are maybe some of the tastes? What are some of the tactile? What do you feel in those situations? So visualization, you really want to start to engage some of your senses, as much of your senses as possible in that process. Helping to reduce stress, you want to engage your senses as much as possible. Moving around, listening to something that's soothing, getting into some taste. We talk about food, being careful of certain foods that you get into. So visualization is another method to learn about that. There's several good YouTube videos out there on guided visualization. I do want to send up a cautionary flag. Some of those guided visualizations have music to it, which is not everybody's cup of tea. I'll tell you right now, there are a couple of those videos out there that I like the visuals. I hate the music. The music just grates me the wrong way. So I turn it down, watch the visuals. All right. Let's talk about control. All right. What I have control over, what I don't have control over. There's a good example. I've got this perfect video. I love the visuals, but the sound is lousy. Turn down the sound. You have control over that, right? All right. Another element here is recognizing and connected to distorted thoughts. All right. So taking that moment and listening to what you're saying, this always happens to me. Oh, nobody understands. Those generalizations we get into and the message we play really feeds into our self-isolation process, where we start to push those away, those who are trying to help us, we start to push away. So nobody understands me. This will never get better. Those kinds of things are overgeneralizations and can be distorted in the thought process and feeds the stress beast that is eating away at you. So watch out for those over-exaggerations. Take that mindful moment of stopping and reevaluating that process of that message that's being played out. Take a moment. We've heard the phrase "stop and smell the roses." Take a moment to be aware of and appreciate the good things that are happening in your life, even as things have fallen down around them. I've worked with victims in disaster situations where they had a much more upbeat level because they were looking at, we survived this, we survived previous hurricanes, and this is the example I'm thinking of. We have family, I've got my health, everything. They're looking at the positive things, so everything will be good. The rest of this can be rebuilt. The material stuff we can get back. Make a list if it helps you to write that down, to see that. Lists are a pretty good thing, making checklists to make sure you get through stuff. And it breaks down those ginormous tasks we we see at first as being, oh my God, this is never going to end. Write down a list, start chipping away at those things. Keep a journal. Journaling for some folks is a good process, especially where we're isolated from a lot of people and we can't have social gatherings as much. Writing down your thoughts and having a place to kind of let it lay out there to be there later for you to look at. I know a few people who have been journaling through their experience of the pandemic and being isolated at home, and they've been writing down their thoughts. And, you know, while in the moment, it's not going to seem like a very positive gift, but it will be years from now. Not only will they have this opportunity right now to kind of relieve or let go of some things by writing it down, but later on they'll have something to go back to, something historic to share with others of where they're at, if they choose to do so. But that's a very powerful thing. So think about that. If that, again, is a process that works for you. Okay, what are those support systems out there? Or that sense of connectedness to others helps to build our resiliency. So I talked about a social support network being important to reducing one's stress. Look around you. How can you connect? Talk about the social media outlets that you may have used or are attempting to use. Again, it's learning a new thing if you've not been exposed to it, to make that connection, staying in touch with somebody. You know, we've got the smartphones out there. Calling somebody, we don't necessarily have to see them. Hearing somebody's voice is often enough, but we want to connect. We want to share ideas and be close with one another. So look for those ways. And if not, again, you know, there are various crisis lines out there. Peace River Center's got their emotional support line that you can use as well. And then the sixth thing, you know, this is an age-old treatment remedy for a lot of things, but it still holds true. And that is getting healthful sleep, eating right, and good exercise habits. Okay, so let's talk about this. This because, you know, creating good life habits, people get stressed out about that. Okay, I think I mentioned earlier that, you know, developing a plan to work on your stress is a stressful process in and of itself. All right, so you want to make that plan realistic. Every year around the new year, folks get, okay, this is a new year, I'm going to start fresh, and they make resolutions. And what we know about resolutions is most people's resolutions barely last the month of January. All right, a few do stick and continue on, but, you know, really changing that kind of habit is, it takes time. It's not going to happen right away. And sometimes those goals are unrealistic. So keep it real. Keep it real. What's obtainable? What's achievable for you at this moment in time? Do some small things. Doesn't have to be ginormous. Well, I'm gonna work on my fluffy six pack here and make it into a nice hard abs. You know. Well, okay. So maybe that'll work for you, maybe not. Look at your schedule. Do you have time in your busy life to carve out that time for going to a gym? Are there different types of exercises you can do? When we talk about exercise, people have this vision of going to a gym and lifting weights and doing aerobic stuff, all of which is good. And if people can do that, great. But, you know, some of the exercise I'm talking about is, you know, keep it simple, you know, go outside, walk around the neighborhood, you know, we don't necessarily have to, you know, get up close to people while we do that. Walk around your house, you know, that kind of exercise. Move. The act of moving itself, that little bit of exercise, releases endorphins in the body that lift your mood, that lift your spirit. So that's the kind of exercise I'm talking about. Now, if you want to get into going to a gym and all of that and making a commitment to do that, fabulous, great. That doesn't work for everybody, all right? But if it works for you, do it, do it. So think about, again, carving out that time in your life to do that. Think small and build on it slowly over time. You know, if you're like me, I'm a gamer. I spend a lot of time in front of the computer at work, and then I go home and I'm spending some time in front of a computer in my game world. Well, you know, that can create stress. You know, that not moving around physically can cause some problems as well. So limit your screen time. And I mean that in a whole bunch of ways, not just the gamer in me saying, hey, limit your game time to only a couple of hours, but screen time with other social media venues. Are you watching the news continuously? Are you seeing what's always out there? News is a very stressful thing for all of us right now. But you know, the information is ever flowing. The news venues need to fill up their time. They're on 24/7, so they've got to fill it up with stuff. And you can sit there and watch this. I see this happen lots of times when we're looking at hurricanes here coming through. People are constantly watching the weather over and over again. It's good to be informed. That's important. But you can get information overload, and that can create anxiety to the point where you become immobilized. So all that information coming in, it's like, oh my God, what to do? Oh, I can't do anything now. So limit that screen time for yourself, for the children in your life, you know. Limit the screen time, do the connectedness thing, have a moment of, you know, shutting off all electronics for a little while and talk, play family board games. It's good to connect with families, you know. We have a process in our household where we have one night where all the even the e-readers, you know, all of that stuff shuts down. We do game time and have discussions and things like that. So those are things you have to build into your life and plan. So think about that. Eating, you know, eating can be a good exercise. I enjoy cooking to a certain degree. There's a part of me that's a bit of a perfectionist, so not getting it just right is kind of like, that stresses me out. So that sometimes the cooking process can be a little stressful. Baking, if you're into baking, it's a more exact kind of cooking process. So, but for folks, that level of control, that level of, you know, exactness is what helps them to calm down. And in the process, hopefully, they're creating meals that are healthy for them, nutritious, fulfilling a very basic need for all of us. So are you eating? Are you eating the right things? Are you getting enough of a balanced meal there to sustain your physical health? Because as you're working on your physical health, you should be working on your mental health. As you're working on your mental health, you should also be working on the physical health. You know, it all works together. It's not separate. So let's talk about this STOP method. Okay, this is a process here that comes out of mindfulness, and really the STOP method is about recognizing when your emotions are starting to run the show. Lots of times when people are anxious, overly stressed, it is more the emotions that are running the situation than our rational thought process. Not that rational thought process should run it all the time, but you know, they work together. They're balanced. They're like a jockey and a racehorse. They have to work together to perform well. And so if one is more in control than the other, it doesn't always work as well. So with the emotions being the racehorse and the logical kind of let's think this through process being the jockey, when they work together, it looks very nice. The stop method helps to get your racehorse under control a little bit. Okay. Excuse me 1 second. Okay, so the stop method. Well, the first step in the stop method is to stop. Okay, stop what you're doing. Take a moment, especially as you're reacting. So, or sense that reaction coming on, and it's something that's starting to boil or get under your skin. Stop what you're doing. Press pause for a moment. Think about the thoughts. Think about the action you're about to have. All right. So, first step, stop. Next step is the T, and that's take. Take a few deep breaths. Okay, remember the deep breath exercise we did? Okay, so take a couple of those, a few of those, to kind of center yourself and become fully present in the moment. Again, engage as many of your senses as you can at that moment in time. Slow things down. What's going on? What's triggering me here? Okay, I'm in an office. The lighting's pretty decent. There's no real distractions. There's some noise going on outside my door. There's things. Become very aware and in tune to your environment at that point. That's what you're doing. You're taking stock, taking a few deep breaths, taking stock. And now you want to start to observe the O in the stop. So observe certain things. What's going on with you? This exercise is good to begin to recognize and identify those items that spark the reaction. So observe what's going on with your body. What am I picking up on physiologically? What is tensing up? What am I hearing? What am I seeing? All those things start to take into place. The emotional aspect. Okay, what's the feeling right now? What is it? Anger? Is it irritability? Is it disappointment? Is it sadness? Is it hurt? Is it loneliness? Is it start to create language for your emotions and being able to identify that reaction. And then the mind part. What assumptions are we making about those particular feelings? Feeling sad, it's a bad feeling. Is it? Being angry, that's a bad feeling. Is it? Ask yourself those questions. Is it okay to be angry? Anger is actually a healthy emotion. It's some of the behaviors that are often tied to anger that are not so positive. All right. What is it that created that anger? And again, don't want to pick on any one emotion. It could be anything that you're experiencing. Where is that coming from? What's that about? All right. What is it that you're telling yourself right now at that moment? Okay. You have that feeling of loneliness. Well, I'm no good. I'm not worthy of having good company or having good friends around me. What is the message you tell yourself that ties into the emotion, that creates that physical reaction? What are all these things you're observing taking place within yourself? And your response, okay? What you're getting ready to respond to a thing that has had some impact on you. So you may have control over that thing out there. If you do have control, make the changes appropriately. If you don't have control, okay, so how can you adapt? What is it you have control over? This is a good place within the STOP method to even ask that question. How much control of this do I have? And what is that message playing in my head? And then the P part is proceed. Proceed. Whatever, move forward with whatever you're doing. You want to be conscious and intentional in your choices and incorporate that in how you learn about yourself. So you've stopped for a moment. You've taken a survey of what's going on. Uh, is this thought useful? Is it not useful? If it's useful, use it. If it's not useful, put it away. Put it away. Um, there, so that whole process will help you get in tune to what's going on for you, and move things forward. All right. So you're now moving forward into this reactionary process with hopefully a little bit more control, and reducing your stress level as you go through it. And your choices, you're making conscious, intentional choices at this point. So that's the important part of the STOP method is, you're becoming much more aware of what's going on. And that's also key to reducing our stressors, as far as knowing what is it that's creating that stress, how are those things impacting me. All right. So we also get anxious and stressed because certain basic needs are not being met. So think about that as well. As you go into the STOP method, you might want to add some of these questions into the O part of that is, am I tired? Being tired does not help with some of the thought process that you may have. It may slow down. You may say things that you did not intend to say, and say things in a way that might be hurtful, and that's not what you meant at that time. Am I thirsty? Are you, having? Are you hydrated? Very important for us here in Florida because of the heat and the humidity that we're all kind of used to if we've lived here for a long period of time. But stay hydrated. Dehydrating is can have a lot of different impacts on you physically as well as emotionally. And hunger. Yes, are you hungry? Am I hungry? So are you about to engage in a conversation with somebody and your blood sugar is kind of low or it's off? That all has an impact on your emotional response as well. So we all hear the word hangry, right? Never get engaged in somebody that's going to be taxing while you're hangry. You're definitely going to come across as biting somebody's head off. So eat something, usually healthy things, please. Usually. Okay. So here are some of the community resources that you can tap into. So get out there and practice the STOP method on your own. Come up with a plan, write it down. Here's some additional resources for you through our crisis line, the 519-3744 number. That's an emotional support line. It doesn't have to get to the level of, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. You can start to process some things by just calling and talking to somebody. Call the crisis line at 519-3744 and say, hi, I'm Kirk. I'm struggling with this issue, and I just need somebody to hear me out. Let me tell my story. To listen to your story. So call the folks, and again, anytime, 24/7. So if it helps you release some tension, release some of that stress by doing that, by all means, it's there for you, and it's a free service. It's a free service. And of course, if things get so overwhelming that you need that help, it's a resource for that as well. 519-3744. Just give us a call. If it's not to a level that you need a crisis response, but you know that, hey, I need to address certain things in my life, we have our appointment line as well, and that is 248-3311. Again, that's 248-3311. Reach out to us to set up a time to come in and speak to a therapist and start to work on those heavy duty issues that are going to take a little bit more time to work through and work with and grow. Hopefully this is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to dealing with one's stress. There, like I said, I teach a 40-hour class in this stuff as well. By all means, please get out there and explore some of those other options that are available. Exercise, yoga, meditation are just a few examples of what people can get involved in and utilize to help reduce their stress. Hopefully we've given you at least a starting point to create your stress management plan. So at this point, I want to thank you for taking your morning out to be with us, or taking some time out to be with us to learn a little bit about stress management. And thank you for participating. And I open up the floor to any questions. Are there any questions out there, Ileana?
I don't see any questions, but I did have a question myself.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about the stress under uncertain times and all that stuff, and how, you know, a lot of people have stressed over whether or not they have COVID, or, you know, what if I get COVID? What am I going to do? What's going to happen with work? What are some of those coping skills that you can refer back to that you talked about that maybe help with that fear of, like, you know, getting COVID and that making you more stressed?
Okay, so that whole uncertainty piece, because yeah, this is, if I could give you an example of a great unknown, this is it, because you can't see it and it can creep up on you and impact your health. You know, I think all the politics aside with a lot of things, if you're doing the things you feel are in your best interest to protect yourself, those are the things you have control over. You have control over whether or not you engage in large social gatherings or even small social gatherings, because what the research is showing is that it's not the large gatherings as much as the smaller ones that are really kind of feeding this virus. So those are choices you have, and those are things you do have control over. Is how much what are the risks you're taking? Because there are certain levels of risk. Even wearing a mask out in the community, there's a certain level of risk with that. But do I stay at home and isolate all the time? Yeah, you could. Again, there's going to be a different answer for different people in that. And just like with anything in life, you know, there are risks, and some of us choose to take those risks, and some of us choose not to. And in this case, it's weighing out those options and being mindful in those choices. Don't go through something blindly and just go, well, this is what I believe and that's it. Say, okay, well, let's be mindful in the choices you're making here, how that impacts you, how that impacts others, you know, is just as important. So thinking it through, making it a conscious choice. Again, going through that whole STOP method that I outlined, of, hey, what are the chances of me getting a COVID? You know, in my own family, we've had those discussions, because it's a scary thing. You know, it's something we can't control. So we worried about, you know, our exposure to that. So we talked about it. Talk about it with your loved ones that are nearby. So that's a key thing to help reduce stress, talking with one another about what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. What are your thoughts? Are you scared? There are many people who are scared, and it's the emotion of fear often comes out in very different ways. It comes out in anger and in aggression, and it's more about fear than anything else. A lot of crises that I work with, that's a big emotion behind a lot of things, it's fear. And so stopping and saying, okay, what is the reality here? Well, you know, when in my own family, I asked the question about the exposure risk, we took a look at another thing that we can get exposed to, and that's the flu, you know, or the cold. And we looked at, you know, we're fairly healthy people. pretty resilient, and we hardly ever get colds. We hardly ever get the flu. Well, what's that all about? What do we do that helps that process, that can help us through this COVID thing? You know, it's a higher risk kind of illness. So what are the things that we're already practicing, you know, to protect ourselves? So inventorying your current resources as you're learning new resources, because sometimes people don't even realize the resources they have in place, you know. And so for us, it was, you know, when we do things, we like to be social, but we're not super social people in our private lives, where we tend to, you know, do things in our own little group. And we do take some risks, you know. We're Disney folks, so we like to go over to Disney. Let's talk about a crowd, right? But still, we practice washing our hands and you know, using hand sanitizer. We did that all along. It's just we've increased it a little bit more because of COVID. So
Sure.
um,
I know one of the other presentations that we attended was they talked about, you know, setting a time for your worries. So like if there's something that's worrying you or making you stress, set a time where you can have that moment to relish in your worry or think about your worry, but then tabling it and moving on. Is that similar to like the STOP method and just making sure that you're aware of what's bothering you, but you've made yourself aware of it? Now let's try to move on from that and set a time to be able to create that awareness around that worry and just like I said, move on.
yeah, absolutely. So and again, that goes back to what I referred to as the control issue. What do I have control over? What I don't? You have control over when and where you can address some of these issues. All right. So yes, take a moment in your day and go, okay, I am going to set this time aside and I'm going to focus on this issue. Think it through, look at it, you know, from all angles too. Don't just come at it from one angle. Again, the STOP method is going to help you with that, as far as where's this thought coming from? What is the message I'm telling myself as I explore this thing? Sometimes it's going to be very sensitive in nature. So yeah, no, that's beautiful. Set some time aside. Give it an hour. Give it a half hour. However long you feel you need. Tackle it head on. And then when that time is over, break away from it, because you have control over that. Okay, I've given you an hour. Break away from it. All right, now I'm going to do something else. I'm going to focus on something fun or something else I need to do that's less stressful. And that's another thing with one's schedule, is try to balance between stressful, high stress, low stress kinds of issues throughout your day. That helps kind of ease some of the added tension that comes with high stressful things. Again, the STOP method is about being mindful of your choices and your decisions. So look at, as you're exploring things, where are those high level stressors, where are those low level stressors, and how can I pepper that throughout my day? So it's more like this. It's like a seesaw as opposed to a full day of way up here. And again, those are things you have control over. There are going to be some those things that are going to throw you way up in the high category for a while too.
Very good.
Good. Any
Do
other
we have
thoughts?
any other questions, Carly?
It looks like we are caught up on questions. I don't see anything in the chat either.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for attending. And thank you, Kirk, for your time and your knowledge and sharing all of that with us. After this webinar is over, you'll receive a survey and information with the recording. So please feel free to share your thoughts with us about how Kirk did in his presentation. Am I stressing you out, Kirk? No, just kidding.
It's all right. No, that's good.
We'd love to hear from you guys and know what presentations you'd like to hear from us. We have a wide array of therapists and professionals who are available to us to provide you with this information to our community. So thank you all so much, and we will close it out and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Everybody.